was good. My agent did his job. Okay. Well, it's 6 o'clock according to my watch. Does anybody in here have a favorite dinosaur? That's how I always kill time when I'm...
Allosaurus NX. Probably it's a newer described species, but recently split off from Saurophagenax, and then the vertebrae that was on the Saurophagenax became a sauropod.
Right. The whole Saurophagenax?
Except for the skull. The skull was reassigned to Allosaurus NX.
Ah!
The vertebrae were reassigned to a sauropod that kept the name. Or inherited it, I should say.
But Epanterius is still a thing, right?
I haven't heard of that.
There we go.
All right.
Let me look up Epanterius. How do you spell it?
E-P-A-N-T.
Come on in, we're get started. Hello.
E-R-I-A-S, I think.
Thank you, Russell. Hello, my name is Darlene. I'm the director of the Tate. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. In addition to Russell's talk tonight, we have some really fun things coming up still as part of the Humanities Festival. So on October 18th here on Saturday, the 18th, we're having Fossil Day. From 10 to 2, it's free, it's for families, lots of hands-on activities. You can do a shark tooth hunt, you can make your own pteranodon. Russell's got some great art going on with dinosaurs, so we invite you back to Fossil Day on October 18th from 10 to 2. Thank you, Joseph.
So I am Dr. Joseph Campbell. I'm one of the co-directors of the Humanities Festival. I can't tell you how pleased we are to partner with the Tate Museum, and I know at least for some of the people in the room, this may be your first time down here, and that's exciting. That's a very exciting thing. The Tate is a gem of our campus, as I always tell my students, and Russell is a big part of that. Let me tell you a little bit about Russell Hawley. He's the education specialist here at the Tate Geological Museum at Casper College in Wyoming, where he gives tours and produces artwork for museum displays. He also contributes a paleontology question and answer column to the museum newsletter. Russell has worked at the museum since 1997 and started digging up fossils in Wyoming in 1990. He illustrates Islands in the Cosmos, the Evolution of Life on Land by paleontologist Dr. Dale Russell. His one-man art show, 1,000 Unnamed Worlds, was on display for 2 years at the Wyoming State Museum in Cheyenne, and we are incredibly lucky to have him here to speak to us this evening. So let's welcome Russell.
Well, thank you. All righty. Dinosaurs, jumper cables for the imagination. Now, the paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould once said that if you're a paleontologist and you're talking to interviewers or reporters, you get asked 2 questions in particular over and over and over again, to the point where it gets actually kind of annoying. And it doesn't matter what kind of paleontologist you are. Stephen Jay Gould studied land snails, fossil land snails. Nevertheless, he kept on getting these 2 same questions. Why did the dinosaurs go extinct? And why are dinosaurs so popular with young children? He had a good answer for the first question, but the only answer he had for the second question was, I really haven't the foggiest idea. Come in, come in. However, he talked to a friend of his, a child psychologist by the name of Shep White, and White said, well, Steve, I think I can sum it up for you in 3 words: big, fierce, and extinct. And I think there's probably some truth to that. If you go to the zoo, the kids are all very anxious to see the elephant and the tiger, much more so than seeing the agouti or the Thompson's gazelle. And as for extinct, that works on 2 levels. First of all, because dinosaurs are extinct, there's a lot of things about them that are unknown. And so, therefore, that gives them a sort of fantasy quality. Nobody knows what color they are, for example. So that means children painting or coloring dinosaurs get to use some imagination. They get to use some guesswork, and they like that. Children enjoy being creative. The other thing about dinosaurs being extinct is that it makes them safe. Small children thinking about Tyrannosaurus rex which is, after all, a carnivore the size of an African bull elephant with teeth as big as bananas, usually smeared with blood from its most recent kill. That's a scary thing. But the Tyrannosaurus is extinct, so the small child can think about it from a position of comparative safety and not risk having nightmares that night. So yeah, big, fierce, and extinct. That was Shep White's guess. I would add another word to that list, and that is the word empowering. Children are in a position where the knowledge is all coming from teachers and their parents. Those are the people who know how to read and write and do sums. They can find Quebec on a map. They can find reverse in a Volkswagen and all that stuff. So the flow of information is always downhill from the adults to the children, except when it comes to dinosaurs. The average dinosaur nerd kid has read a dozen times more dinosaur books than his parents and his teachers put together, and they pick up those multisyllabic, jaw-breaking names almost effortlessly. So every now and again, a parent or a teacher has to ask the child, is this a Triceratops or a Styracosaurus? I can't tell the difference. Or how do you spell Micropachycephalosaurus? And so that puts the child in the position of authority for a change, and they love that. They love that. Ray Bradbury addressed the question as well, and he added yet another word to the list, the word underfoot. Dinosaurs are extinct, but they really, really did exist. And it wasn't on the planet Mars. It wasn't in the Egyptian desert like mummies. Dinosaurs lived in the same place where we're living today. So it's thrilling, especially if you're a child, to think that during the course of your life, you've probably walked right over a spot where there was a dinosaur just a few meters under the ground. And of course, it also raises the possibility that you too could find a dinosaur right in your own backyard, especially if you live in Wyoming. I'm sure many parents' lawns and flower beds have been ruined by kids happily digging for the dinosaur bone that they just know is right on their own property. So yeah, underfoot is a biggie as well. This is a drawing of Benjamin Spalding done by David Weisner. This is the main character of a Ray Bradbury story called So, Besides a Dinosaur, What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? And it's about a child who becomes obsessed with dinosaurs and fantasizes about actually turning into a Tyrannosaurus Rex. This represents one of the stages of dinosaur obsession. Children go through several stages, not always all of them, and not always in the same order, and there's often quite a bit of overlap, but I recognize several of these stages of dinosaur obsession in children. And one of the first ones out of the starting gate is the desire to be a dinosaur. How many times have we seen a preschooler hunched over with his little two-fingered claws, groping the air, growling and roaring, and doing his best to impersonate a Tyrannosaurus Rex? So there's that. Anybody in here watch Rick and Morty? Okay, somebody does. Yeah, there's an episode of Rick and Morty where the dinosaurs come back and they end up being discredited, and the audience is yelling, boo, boo, and one kid steps forward and he says, dinosaurs are lame, now I like trains. That might seem completely out of left field, but that is a reference to Ray Bradbury's story. So besides a dinosaur, what do you want to be when you grow up? So that was a joke intended for Ray Bradbury science fiction nerds and Rick and Morty nerds. Small demographic, the overlap there. So yeah, being a dinosaur, pretending to be a dinosaur, surely there's no place for that in adult professional paleontology. Or is there? Here is a Stegosaurus. Back during the 1990s, I spent my summers at Como Bluff, east of Medicine Bow, helping Dr. Robert Bacher dig up dinosaur bones. And Bacher advocated a practice that he called method paleontology. He said, it's one thing to study, say, a Stegosaurus objectively, but if you really want to understand its role in the ecosystem, a good thing to do is to try and think like a stegosaurus. Get inside of his little walnut-sized brain and start asking yourself, what would it feel like to be a stegosaurus? How would I be thinking? What do I want to eat? How am I going to find it? How am I going to avoid getting eaten by Allosaurus? How am I going to find a mate? And he thought that if people would undertake method paleontology and try and get inside of a dinosaur's head, it would actually provide insights into behavior, social structure, paleoecology, and all sorts of things like that. He went on to write a book called Raptor Red, and this is a novel. It's fiction, but very well-researched fiction, and it's a story of a year in the life of a Utah raptor. And I don't think any writer has done a better job of portraying a dinosaur's thoughts. There's, of course, a whole lot of speculation in this book, but it's very convincing. I'm pretty sure that if we could hear what a Utah raptor was thinking, it would sound a whole lot like the internal dialogue in Raptor Red. By the way, I'd really love somebody to turn this into a movie. It would make a much more interesting film than yet another installation in the increasingly dreary Jurassic Park franchise.
Right.
Now, Stephen Jay Gould had another word of wisdom. He said, every scientist feels like there's at least one Far Side cartoon by Gary Larson that was written just for him. In Stephen Jay Gould's case, it was a Paramecium family vacation slideshow. The Paramecia were all watching the screen, and one Paramecium was operating the slide projector, and he's saying, okay, now here's a photo of Uncle Harry. Wait a minute, maybe this is Aunt Frida. You know what? I think that's just an air bubble. Now, that had Gould rolling on the floor laughing because he took microbiology when he was an undergrad and found it very difficult to work the microscope. He had all kinds of trouble with it, and he spent hours one afternoon trying to get a thin section of what he thought was an organelle in a cell and turned out to be nothing but an air bubble. He wasted hours making a thin section of an air bubble. So that's his. Here's mine. Oh, whoops. Cummings, Schneider, you've got plenty of research to work on. And for the last time, stop making those plastic models fight. I have spent much of the last 30 years teaching children about dinosaurs, and a lot of those children have been preschoolers. And I use my plastic dinosaur models as educational aids. And I can't tell you how many times these words have come out of my own mouth, more times than I can count. But yeah, that's another one of the stages of young dinosaur obsession, is playing with plastic dinosaur models and making them fight and doing that sort of thing. Once again, eventually they outgrow it, and it plays no part in adult professional paleontology. Except, have a look at this. This is a diagram from Dynamics of Dinosaurs and Other Extinct Giants by R. McNeill Alexander, which is a fascinating little book. He uses the laws of physics to figure out things like how a dinosaur's legs could cope with stress, how fast they could run, all sorts of stuff like that. And in this diagram is an illustration of his discussion of combat. So deer have antlers, and the shape of those antlers is such that they can turn a dangerous stabbing match into a shoving match. If two deer end up poking each other full of holes, it doesn't matter who won because they're probably going to die of massive infections in a couple of weeks, and nobody wins. But instead, they can lock their antlers together and, without actually poking holes in each other, can turn that potentially lethal stab match into a shoving match. And then you can find out which deer is the stronger without inflicting any undue injuries. Could dinosaurs do the same? Well, R. McNeill Alexander is showing us here diagrams of triceratopses with their horns locked. And if you get them into the right position, they lock, and they too can shove each other rather than stab each other. Do these triceratops heads look at all familiar to you? If Shaden was here, they would look familiar to Shaden. It's not just it's this Triceratops. That's That's the Invicta Plastics Triceratops that was made for the British Museum of Natural History back in the late 70s. So to get those pictures in that last slide, Alexander must have manipulated his plastic Triceratopses until he'd gotten them into a fighting position with the horns locked. And I think there's just something really funny about the Armagnac Alexander, professional, dignified paleontologist in his spectacles and his white lab coat, making his plastic Triceratopses fight. Kids love puzzles too, and there's no secret that puzzles are a good way of helping children learn colors and shapes and get practice with spatial relationships and things like that too. But puzzle building also has skills that can carry on into adulthood and serve you well. This is K&M ER 1470. As I mentioned in my last newsletter article, this is what I believe is the long-sought missing link. It was discovered by Bernard Ng'enyo in Kenya in 1972 and then described by Richard Leakey the following year. It has a cranial capacity of 775 cubic centimeters, which makes it just about exactly half the size of a modern human brain. However, it did not look like this when it was first discovered. When it was first discovered, it was in 100 pieces. And Richard Leakey tried to put it together. And he tried, and finally he said, it can't be done. It's impossible. There's too many pieces. They're too small. There's too many different ways that they can be fit together, so I give up. Can't be done. And his wife, Meave Leakey, said, do you mind if I take a crack at it? Now, Meave Leakey had been a jigsaw puzzle fanatic ever since she was a little girl. She built jigsaw puzzles all the time, loved them, and then got bored with them because it had gotten too easy. So she started taking jigsaw puzzles and turning all the pieces over, colored side down, and working from shape alone. I like to think that those jigsaw puzzle skills may have aided her in this reconstruction because it took her months and a lot of patience and a lot of glue, but eventually she did it. She got K&M ER 1470 all put together and provided the first good firm figure for the cranial capacity of a Hawley. Now the first artwork that I ever sold professionally was not an illustration for a technical journal or anything like that. They were illustrations done for games. And this is GURPS Dinosaurs, which was published in 1996. It was kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, except that instead of sword-swinging barbarians and magic users, the characters instead were time travelers or cavemen, and instead of dragons and orcs and goblins and things, there were dinosaurs and mastodons and other prehistoric animals. Here's an example of one of the entries. They had lots of kind of like the monster manual from Dungeons and Dragons. I drew the picture of the prehistoric animal, and then they would come up with statistics, things like the strength of the animal, how fast it can move. This is Synthetosaurus, by the way, a bizarre horned ruminant that lived back during the Miocene and the early Pliocene. And here we see that if it attacks you, it does 1 die of damage plus an extra hit point of impaling damage. This is, by the way, the second version of this drawing that I did for them. They originally wanted it to have a caveman riding on its back and using the nose horn as a slingshot. So I did a pencil sketch of that, and they sent it back, and they said that it was too silly looking. Is there a serious way to depict a caveman riding on a... apparently there is. So yeah, I just went straight, tried to draw it as realistically as possible, and they thought that was okay. And then here's another one. This is Amabelodon and his statistics. So yeah, no matter what kind of prehistoric game you're playing, you'll have plenty of beasts for your characters to encounter. Now, an unexpected benefit of this for me was it freed me from the question that I dislike the most. Stephen Jay Gould's got his too. Here's mine. Questions that start with the words, who would win in a fight between? Because, yeah, once one kid asks that, the rest of them are going to ask those kinds of questions for the rest of the day. Many of the time I've had to say, all right, stop it. I will not answer any more questions that start with the words who would win in a fight between, because I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. However, I got a complimentary copy of GURPS Dinosaurs after doing the pictures for Steve Jackson Games, and now I can just hand them a couple of oddly shaped polyhedral dice and the instructions for GURPS Dinosaurs and say, you figure it out. Now this is the Simpson Index. So this is useful for paleoecologists. Imagine that you're walking through a forest and that there are several different species of dinosaur in this forest. And what you need to know is what are the odds that you're going to run into a particular one of those species? How likely are to encounter this species as opposed to that species? Well, you don't have to guess. You've got the Simpson Index, which can tell you exactly what those numbers are. Did anybody here used to play Dungeons and Dragons? It's okay if you want to admit it. This is a safe space. Well, you're probably thinking, well, shoot, we're familiar with that. That's the Wandering Monster table from Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, Simpson Index basically provides us with a wandering dinosaur table. In practical terms, though, it's very useful for assessing how well balanced the fauna is and therefore how healthy the ecosystem is. The other game that I illustrated was Dinosaur Hunters, which was a whole lot like Monopoly, except that everybody's a paleontologist instead of a real estate tycoon, and instead of collecting properties to try and put together a monopoly, you're collecting dinosaur bones trying to put together a skeleton. Like Monopoly, they had random event cards. In Monopoly, they're called Chance or Community Chest. They called them just random event cards in Dinosaur Hunters. Like, for example, on the other side of this one, it says, Sandstorm wrecks your camp. Spend $500 replacing damaged equipment. They wanted the cards to be interesting, and so they had me draw pictures of dinosaurs to put on the other side of the card, on the opposite side from the text. They must have liked them because they ended up redesigning the game to make the cards a bit bigger so that the pictures could be seen more easily. So that made me feel good. We got a dinosaur game of our own in the Tate Geological Museum, the Megafaunal Mass Extinction Game. And this is how it starts out. The players take turns moving these animals. And if a plant eater moves onto the same square as a tree, you get to remove that tree and put it in your pile. If you move a meat eater onto a square with a plant eater, you take the plant eater off the board and put it in your pile. Whoever's got the most trees and animals in their pile at the end of the game is the winner. So that's the setup. Now, on a busy day, I have to set this game back up about a dozen times, like on a busy Saturday. So I've actually gotten pretty good at identifying how old the kids were who were playing the game last, because they all leave the board looking a little different. If it's kids who read the instructions and played the game according to the rules, it ends up looking like this. All the animals are dead, all the plants are eaten, except for this one saber-tooth here. He's probably about to starve pretty soon because there's nothing left to eat. And here are the piles. This player's got that many in his pile, and there we are over there. So they read the instructions, they played the game according to the rules. However, the board looks a little different if the person who played the game last was a 2-year-old. There's what it looks like after a 2-year-old has had a crack at it. And then 3 or 4-year-olds, they leave something kind of interesting. Here's what it looks like after a 3 or 4, I don't know why, but 3 and 4-year-olds are obsessed with taking things that look the same and then putting them all together in big groups. So that's kind of cool. Don't know why that is exactly. And then you get to the 5-year-olds and the 6-year-olds, and they like making little scenes. They put these things together, make a sort of landscape that kind of tells a story. Here, one of the cavemen is about to spear a ground sloth. This saber-tooth is biting the macrochemia's head off. Here, a glyptodont is whacking a saber-tooth in the face with his fagomizer, another Gary Larson reference. Androsarchus is eating a mammoth, and then there's a herd of other mammoths walking through the forest in the background. Now, one of the activities I do with my Saturday club is the Dino Derby, we have dinosaurs here, and we address the question, if they were competing in the 50-meter dash, which one would win? Which one would come in second? Which one would come in last? The way to figure that out is to calculate the hind limb index, which is a simple ratio. You measure the length of the tibia, or shin bone, and measure the length of the metatarsus, or foot bones. And then you add those figures together, and then you divide that sum by the length of the femur, or thigh bone, and that'll give you a number. Usually it's between 1 and 2. The higher the number, the faster the animal can run. It works with modern African animals, by the way. There's no reason to assume it won't work with dinosaurs. And then the student cuts out the dinosaur and then glues it onto this track down here. So this one started with Tyrannosaurus rex, got a hind limb index of 1.3. So they glued their Tyrannosaurus right down there. Well, I found a way of making this seem more like a game. I encouraged all of the students to pick a different dinosaur. Pick a dinosaur of their own, calculate the hind limb index, and then when you got your final number, just shout it out. Tell me what you got. And then I put dinosaur models on the table next to the track. So somebody shouts out 0.9 for Brontosaurus. So here's poor old Brontosaurus on the 0.9. Somebody else said, I got 1.5 for Tyrannosaurus rex. So here he is, right up there by the 1.5. So he's leaving Brontosaurus in the dust there. And then somebody else said 2 for Deinonychus. And then finally the winner was Gallimimus, the ostrich dinosaur, with a whopping 2.4. And then there are models. This is a very respectable way of indulging your dinosaur mania, and people continue to construct models well into adulthood. Kids can snap together models that are relatively simple. I love this one, by the way, because by the time you're done, you not only know what the Tyrannosaurus looks like on the outside, but also on the inside. And it's quite accurate, too. They remembered to put the air sacs attached to the lung. People always forget the air sacs, so yeah, this model gets a thumbs up from me. Then, of course, there's more advanced and complex models with more parts that are made out of styrene, and they have to be glued together and painted. And yeah, once again, even adults will pursue that hobby. Now here is something that looks like the instructions for assembling a plastic model kit, but it's not. This is an illustration from David Bruton's monograph on Sydnea, which is a arthropod that's found in the Burgess Shale Formation of British Columbia. And the Burgess Shale fossils are beautifully preserved, but they are flatter than stale soda. The shale is made from mud that got compressed to within an inch of its life, so these things are practically two-dimensional, very, very flat. So although it shows you the outline of the animal, it doesn't give you a good idea about its three-dimensional structure. But fortunately, many of these animals were preserved in different positions. You've got Sydnea specimens that are flattened from top to bottom, but then others that got embedded in the mud at an odd angle got flattened from side to side. And there's a couple that were vertical and got flattened from front to back. So by looking at those different specimens of Sydnea, Bruton was able to figure out, he, as he put it, I just kept rotating the damn thing around and around in my mind until he came up with a three-dimensional model that met each of the silhouettes with no contradictions. Furthermore, if you prepare away the cuticle, the outer shell, underneath it, you can find fossilized legs and gills and traces of the gut. So with all of these sources of information, he was able to get a very good idea of the three-dimensional structure of this ancient creature, both inside and out. Interestingly, when David Bruton was a kid, his favorite hobby was building models, plastic models of submarines and aircraft carriers and things. And then one more thing that kids love to do is draw pictures of dinosaurs. At first they just draw what they see, setting a plastic model in front of them. But some of them want to go ahead and try and make their dinosaurs as anatomically accurate as possible. And that means learning something about anatomy. And that, of course, opens the door to all sorts of skills and knowledge and vocabulary that might help them in later life, especially if they become a veterinarian or a surgeon. Here's Allosaurus, for example, and these are the bones of the hind leg. We got the femur, the tibia, the fibula, and the metatarsals. Here are the legs of a human, and we know quite a bit about the muscles of human legs and how they attach to the bone. For example, there is a muscle that runs behind the tibia called the gastrocnemius. Everybody else calls it the calf muscle, but it looks like that. And when it contracts, it pulls up on the calcaneum and snaps the foot down against the ground for pushing off. And it's very important for sprinters. If you know somebody who's always winning the 50-meter dash, grab them by the back of the leg. Grab them right here. Make sure this is somebody you know fairly well. But yeah, you'll notice that they have a very strong gastrocnemius muscle. So that is just one example of the sorts of things that you'll learn about dinosaurs if you want to do anatomically accurate drawings of them. So that's about all I had to say about that. Thanks to the people on the screen, and kind of a posthumous thanks to Ray Bradbury and Stephen Jay Gould, who provided me with so much inspiration when I was growing up. Okay, thank you all very much for your time. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? All right, that means that I covered it perfectly, or else it just wasn't all that interesting.